Hello, this is Richard Davis, and I'm with Hollis, and this is The Hills Are Not Flat, where we map the terrain of recovery. The last episode we talked about, how alcoholism or addiction can emulate, certain different things, and then once it moves from the social aspect and the camaraderie and all the weekend warrior games that we celebrate and go to the bars and celebrate your masculinity, to when it goes from that to the hidden portion of life, the closet, the truck, the wherever you can stash it. That's whenever addiction actually starts winning. Public drinking, slow, measured, social, holding a glass, nursing it. That's what we all try to get back to. Everybody wants to be normal, right? And we celebrate normalcy in different ways. And, for men, a lot of times, especially with backgrounds in the military, and even professional degrees, you're used to celebrating milestones and doing those things inside of a camaraderie that involves drinking for the most part. So, but there's this actual shift, where things where it's no longer socially acceptable for a certain person to do those things, and they have to shift into the closet or to wherever else, and they have to drink enough until they can drink enough and to not get caught. So they want to try to stay under that threshold, but when you found yourself in the closet, the guzzling usually doesn't measure out exactly like you think. So you either underperform what you want or you overdo and end up, making a show of yourself. But so the economics of secrecy is where the calculus changes. You stop eventually. You stop enjoying the drink. Drinking used to be an enjoyment. It used to be a celebration of your masculinity. It used to be a celebration of a milestone. It used to be a celebration of the weekend, all the good things that you've done. And then at some point in time, it turns into, how do I stop feeling this way? And, what do I have to do to just get through the day and not feel this way anymore? How do I stop feeling so bad? Everybody's on me, and this is my only solace. How can I rip out enough time in my day without, um, you know, taking away from my family, or taking away from my work, or taking away from my other things that I'm supposed to do, so that I can just have a little bit of a break. And that's where it all is. And it's the hiding spots. And then everyone eventually gets onto that, and they figure out that you're hiding, that you're eluding, that you're abetting, that you're still drinking even after rehab, even after all the promises, even after all the things you said that you would do, even after all the never agains. You find yourself with these hiding holes, and then you find your family, finding those hiding holes, no matter how creative you think that they were. I've heard a few guys talk about hiding it behind, insulation and the walls, and in the attic, and it seems that our families get even more creative than our creative devices to continue on that path. So all of a sudden now you're thrown into a situation where your family is hyper vigilant, and just as hyper vigilant as you, and everybody's on high alert all the time, and it's just not a really great place to be in if you've ever been there, and you know. But I wanted to talk to Doctor Hollis about this. You know, I think what happens after a person goes to rehab, and they do the one more last time, the one more last time again, and they do it over and over again. At some point in time, I think that the family starts grasping at straws, right?
Hmm.
Maybe then they maybe think, well, maybe this person doesn't just have a problem with opioids or cocaine or drinking. Maybe they really have a serious mental illness, and that's the reason. And I'm sure there's all kinds of deals going on in the back rooms of what it could be, because everyone's searching for a reason. People
Mhm.
want to put some sort of a identity. They want to put a definition to the madness. And at some point in time, I think people get creative with it. What have you seen to this extent?
Honestly, a lot. And it speaks more to even than just alcohol. Like I see it with all substances, but questionably alcohol and then a lot of times marijuana, especially in like the younger generation. They can mimic, like substances mimic, it's called a substance-induced mood disorder, which I treat a lot of because I see a lot of clients that do engage in marijuana or drinking or other forms of, you know, drugs in general. So what happens is that when you've got too many substances and the brain's just trying to figure it out, that they're neurotransmitters in the synapses. So substances can induce something that may look like psychosis. I see a lot of clients come in psychosis, and maybe this has happened to you too, Ricky, where you're paranoid, you're delusional, you're kind of feeling on top of the world, grandiose in a sense, because all of that inhibition, is lowered from the substances. So you're doing things that are impulsive, that are not your norm, that you're kind of acting out. It can sort of like look like a bipolar or a schizophrenia, but really it's a psychosis. And it's coming or stemming from that substance-induced mood disorder. So it can very well mirror what looks like a potential mood disorder, and it would make family members question, like, "Hey, could this be something that is more of like interpolated, like and maybe we need to treat it like a schizophrenia or a bipolar." And anxiety, I see it a lot in autism too, the spectrum, just because a lot of times people, when they don't know how to express certain things, or maybe they're just not able to, what is it, and contextualize their feelings, they would rather, use a substance versus deal with what's going on internally because they don't know how to deal with it. And then it will come across like a substance-induced mood disorder, but it's really just part of the addiction. And so it's trying to figure out, hey, again, is it the chicken or the egg? But is this coming from the substance itself, or were there precursors that, were triggered when you started to do it?
Right.
And it's just gone down the negative feedback loop. But I see it often, like I said, particularly bipolar and what looks like schizophrenia, because they're paranoid, they're hearing things, they're seeing things. That grandiosity stands out the most to me, and the impulsivity, because at that point, and this is where you might even see a lot of, and I hate to even use the term addict or someone that engages in different substances. I'd rather use that because I don't want to, I don't know, align anybody to that identity, because there's so, I just think that it's a setup, and again, there's so many factors that come into play. But a lot of even my adolescents that come in and they're having the paranoia, whether it's from drinking marijuana, another drug, we have to treat it and like get it to where they're back to their baseline. If you can even get it back at some point when the brain's had enough, you can't even get it back to your complete baseline. You get it as close as you can with great medications and help or therapy, or a combination. But I have seen it quite a bit where the family's like, this is bipolar, this is schizophrenia, this is some form of the spectrum, and you need to figure it out. And really, it's stemming from, substance abuse. So I can see how it's so confusing trying to figure out, you know, what exactly is going on when you're in terms of the big picture.
But in all fairness, I mean, the flip side of that, I mean, there's always two sides to a coin, right? You're either facing away from it or facing toward it. On the flip side of that, these sort of substances can exacerbate those sort of genes, that get expressed through these sort of things as well, right? I mean, it
Yeah,
could it could express itself or exacerbate a underlying condition that maybe
correct.
wouldn't have been there, right? So
So
you have to you
if
do have to
you
look out
have
for that.
genetic expression or gene expression, genetics are big in mental health. They're big in general. But like if you had the gene, say there's a family history, and we're just going to use bipolar because I feel like I treat the most bipolar than anything. So say there's a family history of bipolar. Females are at a higher risk, but males can still get it too. But if that gene was there, it takes something like a substance or a trauma or a major stressor to sort of express it. And then once it's expressed, that's it. You could go through your whole life and never express it and have the genetic predisposition for it, but be perfectly fine. Or you could go through something triggering or super stressful, you, for instance, being in the war or being overseas, amongst other things, that's just the big one that stands out for me. And maybe that gene was there for another mental illness, maybe or maybe not, but something stressful triggered this gene. And then it can like just once it expresses itself, you have to like get it back in check. But that doesn't mean that you're cured. It just means we keep it where it stays not expressed. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. So maybe touch a little bit on the whole shaming. So we in the last episode we talked about the Scarlet Letter,
Hmm.
masculinity, and how we end up, in this thing again. Everyone's, someone got their second mortgage out, and they spent all their money on somebody. Everyone poured all the resources in. Everyone did everything that they thought was the best thing to do for the person, and then they're still stuck with it again, right?
Right.
So now, you know, believe me, especially in our game with in the professional realm, when as it pertains to this, we're keeping score too, right? We're
Right.
keeping score, and we know what the score is, and we know that we're losing, and so you don't have to tell us that we're what you did, because we already know, and it's a very shameful thing, and
Hmm.
then you find yourself in that, and we keep going back to the negative feedback loop, and because it is a great way to convey it.
Hmm.
But how does that shame feed compulsion? uh you know I've always had this, there's this song, it's called, I'm going all the way down to the bottom, and it's obviously a guy singing about drinking himself down into the bottom of a bottle, but there's this secret fascination with the race to the bottom,
Uh-huh.
and when someone feels like they can't go up, and they're just going to be very overly ambitious about going down. So,
Hmm.
but how does shame feed into that compulsion?
Hopelessness, I think. I think it's like you made so many promises to people. You know that you want to get better and that this is not how it's supposed to be. You go down these coping mechanisms that are considered maladaptive or just unhealthy coping mechanisms, but you're going through something that, the cause of the drinking to begin with, or the cause of the substance use to begin with, maybe wasn't ever targeted. And so, you make all these promises to people, you're going to do better because as a person, you want to do better. You want to reach self-actualization and be your best self, right? But that it's harder than it looks because you make a mistake, someone makes you feel shameful or feel bad. You don't understand the emotion of shame or why you're feeling so shameful about it because it's just not really understood. And the more knowledge comes out and the more people understand that this is more of it's a long-term thing that you're going to kind of deal with, but it's the same with any disorder or disease. It's long term. We just have to work with it. But I think it falls back again to where you just feel like you're letting people down, and at some point you just give up on yourself and you become sort of helpless and hopeless. Not intentional, but it's like you don't think you can do it alone, and because people may have already started that prejudgment of you and
Yeah.
already looking at you like in this way, like just forget him, he can't come back from this, there's no help, blah blah blah. So they're less apt to maybe help you as they would be maybe with a true mental illness like a schizophrenia or bipolar. They don't understand that both are equally just as serious and need help, just help in very different ways. They'd rather judge and not deal with it than help someone find help. And again, it's not even their fault. It just goes back to not knowing where the resources are, and there aren't a lot of resources right now, but that's getting better. But I think that it's just you feel bad about yourself, and then you don't think you can. The depression comes in because you just don't think that you can get out of this spiral or this feedback loop. So it's easier to stay in the known, right? Than
Embrace it, yeah.
try to figure out the unknown. And so it
Hmm.
just continues to happen. It's like you do better, you want to do better, but then it happens. You can't not say no to the next drink because things are falling out of line. And the only thing that you can think of that helps is that drink of alcohol or is that hit off a joint or whatever drug you
And
want.
in this day and age of social media, you
Mhm.
can find almost anybody at any time to align with your maladaptive behaviors, right?
Absolutely. There's a group for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, you can just find it. I mean, like, hey, if my family doesn't get it, I'll just
Someone will.
dial into this group, and hey, man, I'm on cloud nine again.
Yeah.
So, but
Well, and I think too, drinking gives you these hits of dopamine initially, but then in the bigger scheme, it's a central nervous system depressant, like all drugs are. So you're getting these hits, and we all dopamine's the big neurotransmitter that's our pleasure center in the brain, right? When you eat good food, when you eat sweets, when you drink, when you buy things or spend money impulsively, hits of dopamine, right? Gambling, all these things that make you feel good. And then it also then I can't talk succinctly depletes the dopamine within the next day or two. So you have to have more and more to kind of get that same feeling that you got the first time. And then it's like, the withdrawals become so severe or so significant, or you can't keep up with that amount. And then you've got other things going on like depression that is in the back of the brain, and you've got to work on that depression, work on these hits of dopamine that you're trying to re-stimulate, and then the withdrawals appear, and then it's a tragic, terrible cycle if you don't know how to get out
it
of
is
it.
the crossroads between psychological and physiological, the
Right.
intersection of those two, right? And
Yes.
so they are interdependent on each other. But now that we've kind of gotten into the physiological aspect of it, I mean, it really does take a toll on the body. It really does take a toll on the mind, and it takes a long time to actually, kind of come back to whatever center that is what's left over, right?
It takes a lot of time because it's like my patients with schizophrenia and bipolar because it hits dopamine. It also when the patients that are very compliant with medications, these neurotransmitters in the brain, they're very stable. They stop their meds. We have to start from, scratch, and then the brain never comes back to its fully functioning self. And every time they're not compliant and come off, and then we have to come back to baseline somehow. It's never going to be where it was when you first started. So it's like you lose a little bit or the brain deteriorates each time you fall off the wagon per se. And it's harder to get back to that baseline to where it doesn't even know what your baseline is anymore.
I'd like to add to this physiological aspect, and this is still inside the hemisphere of the family errors that we're about to get into. But you know, people don't understand that when someone kind of decides to race to the bottom, right? Actually
Mhm.
decides to do that race to the bottom, the amount of stress they put their body under, and then the subsequent withdrawals
Mhm.
that they go through, those withdrawals can last, up to a week.
Yeah.
And and it starts off, pretty, I guess it looks like you're depressed and you don't feel good, but it does actually turn into a shit show or a circus for the person going through it. And a lot of people are like they're wanting to like beat up on this person while they're going through the shakes and the sweats
The
and the
withdrawals
seeing shit and hearing shit, and like, they're wanting to
and the
like tell.
psychosis.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and they're wanting to tell them, "How you did bad. You did bad like a bad dog. You shit the floor again, and I'm going to rub your nose in it while you're going through this." And I'm telling you, during that period of time, like, I mean,
It's like it's negative reinforcement.
but
And
but
it's
but but
not
but
the time to address this. Like you have to be in the right. It's all about timing too. So
but you have to understand, for the person looking at that, it looks pathetic.
yeah.
It's a very pathetic look, right? And then now this person has put themselves in a shame-based situation again, and obviously they did it, whether it was psychological or not, whatever the intention was, they put themselves on the bed again, shaking and sweating, to be a spectacle, to be, either disdained or to feel sorry for. But I mean, but it seems like in those positions at that time, that is whenever most of the respect is lost between both parties, or the shame is given, right?
Right.
Or it is received. So, like, I'm not really sure how can we give people grace through those periods of time, and what should a person do? They find themselves like that. You can't just check yourself into a hospital every time that you're going through that. I mean, like, how do people bridge the gap between those events and trying to pick up the pieces again?
I think so much it's a personal journey too, and everybody's going to be at a different place, and everybody's family and what they've endured is going to be at a very different place. But I think support, you know, don't look at the person while they're in the midst of it because during that first week, especially the first 2 days, but the whole first week counts. You're in a period of severe, acute withdrawal, and it's life-threatening. It can be, and I just don't think during that point, that's any time that's someone while you're physically going through it, you're mentally not going to accept anything going on. So I don't think at any point during that time is where I would be doing any type of shaming. It's more of like just support and love and understanding, knowing that you'll discuss that later on for like the family. They just have to be cognizant of this is not the time to like throw them into rehab. We've got to make sure physically and acutely you're 100%. Otherwise, there is that risk of dying. Like it can stop your heart. You could have a seizure during the withdrawals. I mean, you can physically die. I mean, your body can shut down. So that's certainly not the time to say, you did this and blah, 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 make you feel bad about it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's the worst of it, I guess. Hopefully we get on past this and we get to some brighter days. But it is one of those things, and one of my biggest points of contention of the entire disease. Whether it be alcohol, which can kill you, or benzos that can, or the real feeling of dying
Yeah,
from opiates and other drugs that where you're not going to die, you're just going to feel like you're going to, right?
right.
But I mean, either way, I mean, like, it's really hard to show grace to an animal that has really stooped down to that level in their life.
I
And
also don't think that surveillance, meaning like, okay, it's happened, the episodes are happening, they're occurring, but constant surveillance, it goes back to what we talked about in the last episode. Like, you've got to give a person experiencing this some autonomy and independence back because it's probably the biggest thing that they're lacking when they're in this state. So, you know, like a confrontational ambush or making them feel bad about it or, pushing you in a corner saying, blah, 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 this won't happen again, knowing good and well it may, you don't, during that frame of mind, while you're in that mindset, I wouldn't even try to make a decision. You just got to get better physically. But I don't think shaming someone or confronting them or like, even like, what is it? There used to be called interventions where it would be like a family intervention. I just don't know how well those go over anymore. Not during that phase anyway, but even in general, because I think it can sometimes backfire. The person has to be open and receptive and insightful enough to know like where their life is going, where we've been. We've got to make some changes, but there are better ways to do it. Like we use what's called motivational interviewing in our practice, and our therapists do it too. And it's you trying to figure out why you want to move on and get better. Because it comes down to this is a journey of you. Your family can be disappointed, yada, yada. And you can be disappointed in yourself, but the only way to really move forward is to change the mindset. Like, I've got to move forward and come to here because this is why, not I'm going to do better just to be better. Like, you've got to have your reasons for wanting to reach
yeah, and so let's
better.
open that up, okay? So let's get on the other side of the bed, right? We've talked a lot about and the advocacy for the uh, the moral animal and how pathetic, you know, that addicts and alcoholics can find themselves in, the situations. But so how does a a family, construct an environment where they make it safe to break the secrecy? Like how can you open the closet and make it safe? Like it matters. I know that it matters to be able to have real talks about these sort of things without it being shaming, without it being at some point in time, you have to have some constructive dialogue. How do people create conditions for honesty instead of forcing confessions or even worse, making someone or not making, and I say that subjectively, uh, making causing someone to feel like they need to lie, right? Because that is the MO. And I know that it feels like cheating to a lot of people, and the lying, it affects the person lying as well. But how do we get away from those forcing of confessions?
I think again, it comes back to timing. Everything's always about timing and finding the right time. It's not during that first week, but I do think there's it's a little acronym that you can use for the person, and then we'll talk about some of the motivational interviewing techniques that family can do to kind of help. But the little acronym I use, it's called RULE, RULE, for you, or not just you, but as a patient or a person. The R would be like resisting the writing reflex, like for, you personally, or for someone experiencing personally, or even a family, like don't immediately go in and feel like you've got to write this and fix this, because a fix is not always instantaneous, right? It takes time, and then you've got to work through a solution. So we're not going to always try to jump in and fix the problem. Sometimes it's just got to run the gamut while you're in those crucial, period of time anyway.
Yeah.
The
Well,
second one, the U, is understand the patient's motivations. So moving forward, what would be the main reason for change? Like, is it because, hey, I've got kids, I want better. Hey, I want better for me. Hey, I want better for my family, or I want to go back and do a good job, blah, blah, blah. Whatever your reason for change is, you want to outline that. Um, and then understanding whether it's myself, whether it's you, whether it's another person, whether it's family, just understanding, a motivation for change. Listening with empathy versus sympathy, because that's a big difference. Like, to empathize with someone is to feel the pain they're feeling, but you're not feeling sorry for them, right? But then when you're sympathizing with them, yeah, you feel really sorry for everything they're going through, and that's sad, but you're never really understanding what it means or what they're going through. So that's why it's always better to be empathetic versus sympathetic. There's a time and a place. And then the last one would be the E, the empower. So empower the person, empower the patient, build their confidence and their ability in wanting to change. Like, what would be the reason that we'd want to, even just some confidence builders, start small and then, work your way up, would be, that's my rule for like you or even a family member, to kind of think about it moving forward, how would be the best way to show support. Yeah, we still have something we need to fix or work with, but there are better ways of just addressing it, I think, and that everybody's going to be more open to seeing. But then I also really like the motivational interviewing, like I was saying, where, when it's the family, or if there is an intervention, or even me or a therapist, if we're trying to get to the root of it, and if it has become a problem, or if things just aren't changing for the better, um, asking open-ended questions. I would encourage that. How might things be different for this person, for the family, moving forward? What does that look like? Have a picture. I'm very visually oriented, so have a picture of what it would look like. You like trees. What are they called? They're called, the tree, the information trees, or what are they called that you
oh,
like?
you mean the process trees? Yeah.
You love your process trees, even writing
Uh,
something out like a process tree where you've got the problem and then multiple solutions. I love affirmations. I'm a huge fan of mindset changing and having a positive mindset. So I use, core affirmations for other things that I've wanted to work on in life.
yeah.
Just belief in yourself, reflective listening, repeating or rephrasing what you say to me if you were my patient, or if a patient said something to me, or if a family member is saying it, or vice versa, repeating or rephrasing it so that you're showing understanding on both ends, and then summarizing it together. Just better communication, I think, and trying to understand and be supportive and not blaming. I don't think the blame game's the way to go, because it makes you feel worse. It sends you back down the negative feedback loop and the shame spiral. And when I was first became a clinician, it's not that I would blame them. It was just hard for me to understand and empathize. And being a clinician now, almost 8 years, empathy is very, very easy for me, because I've acquired the skill. I understand it's not the same as sympathy. So just understanding that, you know, we're here for you, or you're here, or your family is, and having the support, but also knowing that we can't be the only ones to fix it. Like, you have to want to do it. It's you wanting, or you are the person wanting to. I don't mean to say you as the person, but it's
Yeah, yeah,
wanting.
yeah. What's so amazing is that we have all these answers now, and we forget that for hundreds of thousands of years we've lived in a primal condition where our body is just, and our minds are already wired for, that reward center, and for, a certain way of doing things that are outside of all of this interpolation and all of this deliberation, and all these higher thoughts of what is good and what is bad. And we've dumbed it down in the very beginning, I guess with God first. We've done that for thousands of years, right? Where we've used God as the moral compass, and the sort of ruling power on what it means to be moral.
Hmm.
But for hundreds of thousands of years before that, I mean, we lived in just a state of you know of do this, then that, then this, that. And so, like, we're still wired that way. Hundreds of thousands of years don't just go away because all of a sudden we're smarter and
Hmm.
we can speak better, more words. At the end of the day, at some point in time, when a person crosses the threshold into addiction or into alcoholism, it hijacks their brain and makes them feel like it is a survival mode. They are in survival mode. So, like, taking that away is almost kind of like being in a famine, or like not being able to breathe. A person feels like they're being hijacked if they can't get back to that survival mode. So, I mean, that's kind of how I feel that we're still kind of wired, and that's why I feel like it's a little bit harder to maybe overcome, hundreds of thousands of years, or of that primal instinct. But but that brings me back to the moral language versus the clinical reality. You know, Families even now still try to use, you know, weakness. It's selfish. It's you've broken the promises. If you just went to church more, if God was, prominent in your life and you put him first, you're demon possessed, or you have these, all these problems because of Satan coming against you. Um, you know, if you would just pour your heart into the church, maybe God would complete you and would deliver you. And you know, of course, I've come across the full gamut, and I have friends that have too. And growing up in the Church of God, obviously, I probably heard a little bit more of it than most of my friends and colleagues. But you know, in how we grew up, and you grew up in the Church of God as well. You know, Families see addiction or alcoholism as a weakness. They see it as selfishness. They see it as broken promises. They see it as a clear divide from God, and it's really seen as just being almost because you haven't really embraced God into your heart enough to get away with it. But so to not really, go against our family. I hate to
Yeah.
do that, but I'm saying, but to actually give the clinical reality of it. I mean, when you look at a hijacked brain and the chemistry, you look at the compulsion, overriding intention, you look at the hundreds and thousands of years that we've been wired primally for these reward centers, that started off maybe as sugar, and then in the eventually wine, and it went on from there to whatever else. Like, what do you see from the clinician standpoint? Where is the real divide between that and the morality of it all?
I mean, that's a great question because of how we grew up with the Church of God and how it wasn't socially acceptable in the Bible.
Yeah,
I think it falls under holistic centered care, if I'm being honest. And I'm a nurse first and foremost, and I have a doctorate, and then I have my clinician, my NP. I think you treat the whole person and understand that it's neurobiology that is at play here. It's not just the person that is evil that wants to just drink and cause, destruction. It's that there are neurotransmitters in the brain or neurochemicals in the brain, and they literally can't help it. When you flip that switch, it's hard to unflip it. We've expressed the gene, and it's a lot harder to just stop than what people understand. I mean, are there treatments that help? Sure, there's a ton of different brand new medications on the horizon. There's old ones that we use now. And I think it's going to be more of that treating the person holistically, loving them no matter what. There's no hate, there's no judgment. Like my patients feel free to come in and tell me anything they want because they know that I'm going to be extremely excited, unless they tell me they've killed somebody. It's completely different. But like they're
yeah,
extremely comfortable and safe telling me stuff, and they know that I love them unconditionally because that's what you do, as a clinician, as a person. I think ultimately what the Lord would want us to do, you love them unconditionally, and you just do the best you can. And so I treat them from every angle, like physically, mentally, socially, like we look at everything. But I do think it comes back to just treating the whole person. They're not an addict, they're bigger than that. Like God created each of us. It's just an identifier because they had a bad time, right? And we don't want to be identified as that because we're so much bigger than that. Even someone with bipolar, for instance, that's like this. For me, it's important because I need to know how to treat it. And it's a diagnosis for insurance, but that doesn't mean that, that defines you, just like drinking doesn't define anyone. And you can overcome it, but it's a process like everything else. Like I said, it's discipline on the person's part. If you don't do AA, it's not a big deal. I think more so sometimes just therapy, having someone that supports you and a friend that if you fall off the wagon, that's going to understand, like, listen, I hate it, but I still love you and we're gonna just try to do better this time. Let's see what went wrong and try to, move on from that, reflect back. So I just think there are just different ways in how you, I don't know, how you look at it or define it and just how you treat the person holistically and know that it's so much bigger than them or alcohol and that they're bigger than just,
Yeah.
an addiction themselves. You love the person no matter what. That's what I'm
So,
going to take it back to.
yeah, we're going to go back to, kind of the process. The family gets scared,
Mhm,
we're in acute, mode. Then they get angry
mhm,
because, things don't happen the way then they become controlling. And I've experienced this, and it's usually in that order. The fear becomes that, if I watch them closely enough, I can stop it. And then, when they eventually figure out that they can't, the anger becomes this overwhelming, you're destroying this family. And then at some point in time, it pivots over to, if you don't, if you can't stay inside this box, right? If you can't, and because we all come from different socioeconomic, backgrounds, and everyone has, differing maybe skew on this, but you know, when your family comes to you and says you're destroying the family, you're going to have to fit inside this box, or we're going to have to, uh, almost pretend you don't exist or ostracize you. The church has done that through the years. I have a few of my friends that are actually now in the military, one in the army, who's been ostracized from his church. I mean, it wasn't, the church just said, hey, even though you're a highly decorated army veteran and been, seen 3 tours, your alcoholism is just too embarrassing. We're going to ask you to please leave the church. His family did something similar to him. I've had some experience with that, or at least with ultimatums. Several different times, and I've seen this across the full gamut in recovery. Most guys will tell you they've crossed that line.
mhm,
They've come to it, and I think this is where families unintentionally damage recovery. I mean,
mhm,
when a person feels like that they don't belong anymore,
mhm,
and now they've lost their masculinity. Hopefully they still have their platform and they can build their platform, and they can get their masculinity back, and they can maybe do it somewhere else, but that still affects a man or a woman whenever they lose their family, or their family gives them an ultimatum and says, it's either this or the road. It's either this, or we're not going to have you, to the Thanksgiving dinner, or we're not going to have you for Christmas, or you're not going to be invited to the kids' graduation. We don't want you around because we can't take it anymore. And at that point in time, uh, there's really not much left for that person in the way of support, unless they can garner it from someone else that's not, already to their up to their gills with it all, right? I
mhm.
mean, like, what would you say to that? I mean, what would you what kind of message would you give to the family that conveys that sort of ultimatum? And then what kind of words of wisdom or support would you give to the person who's dealing with it?
So I'd validate the family because I've been on both sides. I mean, I've had family members struggle with addiction in the past too, and we've been there. So I'd absolutely, and it does get old. I can see both sides. So I validate the family, and and let them or just make sure they're aware that I'm hearing them. I understand. I know that it's tough, and it's like you just get up to here, you don't know what to do, and then that's when I would encourage like. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. And so if this has become a process and it just keeps going through the same negative feedback loop, we've got to do something different. And so what that might look like is instead of threatening and shaming, let's come up with a new plan where all of us work on it together. So if it was like you and your significant other and kids or whomever, or you and your family, whomever, y'all come up with a plan that would be something that you could do together that they could live with, that you could live with, that would also make it easy for you to stick to. Like not you and I don't mean to say you, but to this
No,
person.
I
So
get it. Yeah, yeah,
I don't mean to make you specific to it, but
yeah.
just to where everybody could live with it and love them and understand that yes, there may be ups and downs, there may be slip ups, but at the end of the day, you know, we can always fix something. And this is what I tell my own patients when I tweak things. Like I may not know what's going to work initially because everybody's so different and it's about them. So I never like to generalize, a specific disorder to this is exactly how we're going to treat it and this is why and blah blah blah. There's no way we're going to tweak it. And if this doesn't work, we're done. No, we're going to tailor it to that person, their family, what their needs are, what's working, what's not working. And then we're going to keep reinventing it and keep evolving it until we have, made a solidified major change. And that's really what I explain to my own clients when I'm dealing with them, whether it's mental illness, addiction, whatever. I'm like, have some grace. Don't expect that we may even we may get it right the first time because, I'm expected to have the knowledge of medications, right? But there's also a lot of medications in each class. So do I get it right the first time? Sure. But there's a lot of times where we have to tweak things or add things on or figure out what doesn't work to figure out what does work. So I would just encourage you to reinvent the wheel each time, you and your family members. And if that doesn't work, let's figure out a next step to see if maybe this process would work a little bit better. It goes back to your process trees. Have different goals or outcomes in mind with some different interventions. And then if one thing doesn't work, let's exit out, move to the next thing. Because at the end of the day, when everybody's in support and we're all moving towards positive things, it's amazing what that outcome looks like. And I think celebrate small wins too. So maybe, a person slipped and had a drink, but a drink's better than having 12 or 15. So, and with my clients now who have spouses, their own spouses in sobriety, or maybe they're in sobriety, I celebrate wins with them all the time. I'm 60 days sober today, Holly. Well, yeah, let's do something amazing, So there are ways that you can reward things. And I'm not saying that. I guess small wins, reward even small things because these small things turn into big things and just try to be more understanding and have less emotion about it because it is a process, it is a journey. There's going to be, slip ups, failures, wins, but that's what it is in every area of our life, every area of mental illness, even in my own life. Um, I do this my entire life, my own self. Like if something's not working, I figure out what to fix and how to make it work better for me and for everyone else versus trying to do the same thing over and over that we know doesn't work. Does that make sense? And I think that's where that
Yeah.
negative feedback loop comes in because it's like I feel shame, I feel remorse. The family's mad. I'm making this promise. It's never going to happen again. Knowing good and well you don't know if it is or it isn't because you're just going to say what you have to say to get them off your back and hope for the best. But if we're looking more towards that motivational interviewing, like let's focus on the reason this time is why we're going to change, not because I'm going to slap your hand, you did bad, but why do we need to change? And let's see what
Hmm.
that process looks like to change. It's a whole different outcome because I see it every day. I have these clients and I have some that have been sober for years and doing amazing, but it all falls back to their plan, their support, and, you know, their mindset.
Yeah. You know, I can and I used to talk to my brother a lot about this, Brent, and we talk about, how these things undermine all the good things you do.
Yeah.
And like you do all these great things. Sometimes one of my jokes are that you know, I could there could be an asteroid coming toward the planet, and I just get in my rocket ship and I'd go up and I then push the asteroid out of the path of Earth, and save 90% of the planet. But then somebody, Karen, or specifically probably Elisa, would say, "Yeah, but you were drinking," and it would just undermine everything. I mean, you saved the world, right? But I mean, you were drinking, so it undermined everything. So that's one of the things that is my biggest point of contention with it is that you know people can be can still do good things in recovery. They can
Yeah.
still do good things that are good for mankind. They can some of the smartest people I've met are addicts and alcoholics. They do good works, and I think it's a little bit it's a little bit of a it's a shame really that it does undermine even the good things.
It
So
does.
it's not just the bad things that come to light. Even the good things don't really get what they deserve. But I want to kind of talk about the flip side of that. Okay, so that's a normal response, I guess, as we've seen, and I guess whatever normal is, right?
Hmm.
Normal people, whatever they are, and that's how they treat it. But then we have another real, sort of dark side to it with codependency.
Hmm.
So we already have this chasm. We have this erosion of the chasm, right? And eventually, it becomes too great of a divide to build a bridge over for family or the normal people. And but then we get stuck with the people on our side of the chasm and who are codependent, and then who we are codependent upon. And it really makes a person not really want to bridge the chasm anymore because they found at least some sort of a consolence, right,
Hmm.
in someone who's enabling them to continue, to live whatever lie that they're telling themselves, or a person who's lying to themselves to live with the lie, right? I
Right.
mean, we all tell each other ourselves lies sometimes to make things more comfortable and to try to have some semblance of normalcy in our own, fucked up lives. But what have you seen, and what would do you any kind of words would you have to say about codependency and how it can it can potentiate this the further of this downfall in addiction, and how have you seen it play out, and how have you seen it for both sides?
So I'll tell you that it doesn't just fall specific to addiction. It falls in a lot of mental illness, specifically a lot of personality disorders. I think awareness, number one, and education helps to bring it to light. So a lot of times too, just being aware of it can change, the outcome or the destination later on. But as far as like the cycle of codependency, if someone is actively helping you, keep it a secret or keep it a lie, I mean, you're just perpetuating the same negative feedback loop and cycle. And again, it's the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. One of you has to be the bigger person or come to the bigger resolution that we have to do something different at this point. And it doesn't mean you have to leave per se. It just means you reset clear, better boundaries, or that I think the person that is the one that's experiencing the codependency has to have, I don't know, a reflection of themselves, an acceptance and an awareness of this is where I'm at and an understanding. And they have to want to make the changes or it's not going to work. Like if I come to you and I'm having X, Y, and Z problem, and I know that, it's because I'm not making the best decisions for myself until I decide to make the better decision, whether right or wrong, and make it more about me and less about what anybody else is doing, it's not going to change. So I think the key is to make sure you're aware, you're understanding with yourself. You love and accept yourself no matter what. You give yourself grace, and so does the other person. But understanding and just being educated about the cycle of codependency. Education goes a long way, and I don't mean like having to have a doctorate degree. Even a few key things that they're aware of to maybe not do that would, only inhibit or not inhibit, sorry, make that cycle worse, being aware of that for that person. I have seen it work out on both sides. I've seen it get worse and the cycle perpetuates and nothing changes. And then I've seen it where people make the mindset and the identity change that I'm not going to live like this no matter what. Because it comes down to you. And I don't mean you, Ricky. I mean the person that wants to get help. They have come down to the decision that they're going to fix something or do something different no matter what. And then everybody else is going to be on board because, that's the only way you're going to be able to I guess survive that or get through
Mhm.
that. But I have seen people overcome it. It's just awareness is key. You have to know every day what you're thinking, what thoughts you're consuming, what you're, assuming about yourself and in general, so that if you're not aware of it, you can't change what you're not aware of. So if you don't know that you're codependent per se, or have the great insight, you have to sort of figure it out first before you can make a change. So just the awareness.
Yeah, I mean, but everyone's always trying to look for their box. They're trying to look for a confirmation bias, and so then that's when you end up, with the family drawing a line for their team, and then you drawing a line for your team, and then you get this, everyone's got their own confirmation bias, what their reality is, how a person who's in it feels they're doing better by so many leaps and bounds. The other side doesn't see it because they're not getting weekly or daily updates. And then, before you know it, uh, you really have a division in the family,
Mhm.
friends, and everything else. But we can really, kind of touch on that maybe in
I,
a.
I think too, another big thing, time. You know, it comes down to, yeah, I've been sober for 60 days, sober for 90 days, blah, blah, blah. I think so much of it comes in time, making the right decision for yourself, not them, because it goes down to self-help first, right? So making the right decision for yourself every single time. And then eventually that catches up and people see that you're serious this time. But also forgiving and giving grace and loving you regardless if there is a slip up. I mean, nobody's perfect, myself included. And there are slip ups occasionally for whatever. And I think for me, when I slip up on something, I can't even think of anything. Like I used to be impulsive with my ADHD spending money. Oh my God. Yeah, that's one example. And so I made the worst decisions and put myself in a bind. But I think for me, the key to change was that awareness component. And then I could tell people all day long, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that. But until I showed them, you know, they weren't going to necessarily believe it. But I think it's less for you to have to show or tell, and more when people just see that, you're changed. That's you know, the biggest difference there when they see it.
Well, it is a shame that we even have to have this conversation, or that there even is, these sort of dynamics in life. But I mean, I can see it from both sides. You want to give someone an ultimatum, so that you can protect the integrity of your home and your effect and what you're doing. I've had a few friends in the past that were they were pretty bad off, that would come and crash at my house, and I could never wait to get them out. I hated to be around them whenever they were slobbering and stinking and stuff. So I know what it's like to be around a pathetic creature, and to just want them to go away. And it is really hard for love to win in some of these situations, especially whenever someone feels like that person is not putting their best effort or best foot forward. It can look like someone not having a strong resolve. It can look like someone not seeking God enough. It can look like someone just giving up. It can look like selfishness. It can feel like cheating. It can feel like a lot of those things, and I don't want to ever take that feeling away from people who have it, because I've felt it myself, and it is a real feeling. Uh, I guess I wanted to have this podcast more for people like me, and for them to see it, from the other side, right? And maybe get some real ground roots information about, how addicts and alcoholics can maybe, try to cross that divide, but also for families to see this side too. I mean, I'm sure everyone's remembered their child being smart and, painting something really nice, or writing a great uh, uh, poem, or a book, or something for school, there was always some moment that they were proud of their child, and before their child maybe slipped into the abyss. And you know those people are still in there. They're still in there. There's still people. They're still trying to get out. They're still trying to do the best they can. And with any hope, or hopefully, with I have the intention to try to help both sides to see that the hills are not flat. We have to get up every day, and we have to put our boots on, and we have to climb them.
I think it's a conscious decision every day because I may not struggle with addiction per se, but there are some days and enduring a lot of trauma of my own, and I'll talk about it on another podcast because we're going
Yeah,
to talk a
yeah.
lot. But, there are some days that, you have to just get up and decide it's going to be a good day and I'm going to make good decisions today, no matter what. And even if I don't, at the end of the day, I'm still going to get up and do it again the next day. And it's just a conscious decision to make it a habit, to have, a positive mindset. But not just with that, when you talk in terms of like the other side, and this isn't the episode for this either, but just to sort of let people know that they aren't alone in the other side is that my younger sister was an addict also, and she died. She killed herself 10 years ago. She had gotten really drunk, and I threw her away that night, Ricky. Like, I don't think I even told you. And you bringing that up, it just made me think about it because you don't want to be around it when it's like you said, they're on your couch and you can't wait to get rid of them. And it was that type of a situation. And I wasn't in mental health yet. I was just, a nurse. It's sort of what caused me to go into mental health. But I mean, I threw her away and didn't want to be with her that night. And then there were other things going on, and then she killed herself. And that's another big danger when you're talking in terms of addiction and
Yeah.
impulsivity and it mimicking another like an actual mental illness like bipolar or schizophrenia. When you're psychotic and you're in that throe of it, and she was 3 times the legal limit. She, you know, pulled out a gun and she killed herself. And this is the one that's like me, really into her looks, loved, life. She was the highlight to all of our lives. Like I adored her. And she did something I never thought she would have done, or my parents, like they never would have left a loaded gun if that was the case. But that's what it looks like on the other side and throwing someone away. Like, had I been there that night, would it have been different? She may have still done it, but I mean, I feel bad for throwing her away in essence that night. And were there like worsening problems occurring? Absolutely. Like this was just delving into it, but like being on that side sucks too. And if I could encourage anyone, it's like I would never want anyone to endure or occur what I've had to endure because of that. And I know you've lost a lot of friends and family in similar situations. So with us doing this, if we can, change someone's life or save a life or let them know they aren't alone, that was my reason for wanting to be here with you and, talk about some of this. It is hard stuff to talk
It
through.
is very hard, yeah, and I
And
hate
people
that.
just don't know that there are options and there is help. It's just knowing where to go get help, I think, is so much of it. Because so many of my patients were like, I didn't even know I could come to you for that. And I'm like, yeah, come here.
and
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 if,
here,
if I can't help you, I'm going to figure out how to find the help
yeah,
for you.
and here's the thing is that, and I had my buddy Dr. Roach, kind of do the same thing,
Yeah.
and you know, with all, I mean, good looking, great family, everything in the world, going for him, and a lot of these people just needed 2 more days to sort it out. They just needed 3 more days to sort it out.
Yeah.
You know, all we had to give them is maybe a day or two or something. Once you get on the other side of it, it doesn't look all that bad anymore.
Right.
If we can just save a few people that just need 2 or 3 days to like get over it, like, if you want to kill yourself, like give it 2 or 3 days and think about it.
Yeah.
Like give it 3 days and get out of that. I promise you it won't feel the same way. I'm not saying that's for anyone, but whenever it's induced by drugs or alcohol,
Mhm.
there's a good chance that once that clears, it won't be as bad, you
Correct.
know. So
Because she wasn't that way without. Like she was,
yeah, yeah.
that's why we were all like, what? Where did this come from? But when that hit, like, there wasn't a whole lot that I could have done in general. But I just think it's important. Again, it's insight, it's awareness, it's letting people know there's hope, and that if they can just hold on, like you said, a day, 2 days, 3 days, that mindset's going to change. And then we can figure out where to send you to get the help that you need so that it doesn't keep reoccurring. And there's always help. Again, it's just knowing where to go. But yeah, I think it's important because I don't want to see someone be like my sister was because I threw her away that night. And I don't want to even say I didn't necessarily throw her away. I just wasn't going to deal
No,
with it.
it's
And I
just
was like, I'll see you tomorrow.
you get sick of it. Yeah. So I mean, like, and that's the reality of this, of the pathetic animal. I mean, that's what it is. It's a hopeless, pathetic animal, and a gnashing of teeth at the same time.
But
I
the
mean,
thing too is that trauma, it's induced by trauma. So for her, there was a lot of stuff in childhood that happened with other people, not our family, that contributed to a lot of trauma. With you, I do think being, in the war overseas, being a veteran and so many of your friends and everything that you've seen and endured, that's trauma inducing on its own. So you're already at a higher risk. Anybody that has trauma is already at a triple risk of developing some sort of substance abuse because you self-medicate. So I think awareness, education, and bringing this to light is so imperative because if they are dealing with these trauma type things like PTSD and you want to self-medicate, it's just not the way to go. It seems like it is in the moment, but then it just spirals and then it's harder to come back from. And then because you're self-medicating, you don't really know that there's a problem because you're not necessarily on the floor depressed and you don't think that it's that big of a deal and you don't realize that hey, this could be coming from trauma and we can fix, get help for some of the trauma and then make better decisions as a whole. So it's just starting, with some of that stuff would prevent an outcome like that, but you have to know and be educated and just have it, I guess, in your awareness so you are able to see it. Does that make sense?
no, it does. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Well, I think that is it. I appreciate you doing this with me today,
Yeah.
and we'll put out some more. But yeah, guys, yeah, just remember that there's always someone in your life that you could probably reach out to, and the hills are not flat. And
And God, reach out to us. That's what this
yeah,
channel is for and your platform. If they need something, certainly reach out to us. If we don't know it, we'll find the answer. That's what I tell my clients. I'll
yeah,
help you find the answer.
and we'll fly and we'll climb one hill at a time together.
That's right.
All right, guys, we'll come back and see you next week.